Chapter 14. Obstacles and Objections to Sai Worship. The obstacles to Sai worship that have existed from the very beginning of Sai's rise to public notice, and which continue up to now, are numerous. Only some have been mentioned till now on account of the great and prominent part these obstacles played in the initial stages of the Sai movement. We shall notice, however, some more obstacles to Sai worship. Obstacles spring not merely from those who are against religion and who care nothing for saints or God, but also from those who are religious and professedly religious too, and exulting in their orthodoxy as the special form in which God has to be approached and religion exercised. Orthodoxy in all religions played a great part in the resistance to Sai movement, but by the Gita declaration that all greatness is from God and its worship is the worship of God, opposition is greatly toned down among Hindus in this country in the last century. Persons who have fixed ideas, a sort of straitjacket for religion, and who assume that everyone must bend to their views or be considered irreligious, is the best description we can give of ultra-orthodoxy. These look askance at anything new which they have not understood. In the case of Sai Baba, he was very little understood in his lifetime, and even now, after so much trouble has been taken to unearth all the experiences of many devotees, and to arrange them and see what light they throw upon Baba, still his ideas and methods and the plan he had, we are left in considerable doubt about Baba on many important matters. No wonder Orthodox people with self-assurance as to the correctness of their modes and as to their being in high favor with God, an account of their religious orthodoxy and proud of the position given to them in society, fail to understand Baba or his methods and work. Of course, it is not all Orthodox people that object to Sai. If Baba turned water into oil, several of these Orthodox would not get convinced thereby, but explain it away as a piece of magic worked with the help of some inferior power and for some worthless purpose. Even Shama, that is Madhav Rao, thought so at first. They would not take the trouble of calmly studying all the facts and arriving at the conclusion as to how that particular thing came to be exhibited, what Baba's motive was, and how Baba intended that character should operate. Baba was really anxious to humble the two shopkeepers, the oil mongers, who uttered lies and said that they had no oil when they had it, and to make them realize that God has various ways of helping bhaktas like Baba when people like the shopkeepers should refuse their help. Baba used that occasion for teaching very good lessons to the offending shopkeepers, and perhaps incidentally realized that the effect upon large portions of the masses would be to make them deal with him no longer as a negligible fakur, but as a person who enjoyed at least some of God's powers, if not all, and who is really a God-man or God's man. The very highly Orthodox, however, would not draw these conclusions. They kept up their attitude and would not take any notice of Baba and his work. The immediate result of this, namely this worship of Baba in the mosque by some unsophisticated villagers, would and did stiffen the backs of several of the Orthodox and make them abhor its result, that a Mohammedan worshipped by Hindus in a mosque. To treat that as a good act of religion was something unthinkable for them. They could only condemn this as being a great evil, a doubly bad affair, and what was produced in this was still greater evil. This explains how the railway personnel at Kuperkohen and various people like the Valambi station manager and others continued lecturing to people that Baba was a dangerous and immoral man, or at least not a person for any good work of God. Many of the Orthodox also have a sort of group feeling, and they hold on to their ideas decade after decade, uninfluenced by the progress of events. Unfortunately, in the case of Sai Baba, for long there was no history or explanation of Baba like the present work, nothing that could enlighten even a fairly calm and impartial member of the Orthodox group, or help him to study Baba and arrive at correct conclusions. No wonder that Sai Baba was misunderstood by many in the regions around Shirdi and in the Maharashtra state. Even now, numbers of the Orthodox in the various states to which the Sai movement has spread continue to be moving and thinking on the old lines. All sorts of flippant and frivolous objections to some act of Baba or some fact about Baba, which comes to their notice, are raised and considered important by them. Even in January 1955, someone ran up to the All India Sai Samaj Mandir and said that an objection was raised as to inconsistency in Baba. He asked, if Baba was Venkusa's disciple and Venkusa was a worshipper of Tirupati Venkatesa, then Sai Baba ought to have worn the namam, that is, the 3 perpendicular marks on his forehead, whereas several pictures of Baba exhibit him with 3 horizontal lines on his forehead. This person who raised this objection was a very well-meaning and educated man, yet the objection struck him as a forceful one. Then he had to be shown, first, that Baba did not wear any mark at all on his forehead, and second, that the pictures that the objector had seen were pictures drawn by worshippers of the present day, who knew only that Sri Babu Rao and some other worshippers had put on Baba horizontal lines on the forehead, to which Baba finally yielded assent and nothing more. And thirdly, that the whole thing was a mere external observance of very little significance, and that if Das Ganu and similar worshippers could put on Baba's head vertical marks, Baba would have raised no objection either. Baba's explanation for his submission to these forehead marks was, what am I to do? This worshipper believes that I am his guru and puts on these marks which he put on his guru. Therefore, it must be understood that Baba was neither a Shivite or Vaishnavite, either in his views or in his external observances as to the painting his forehead, and that he took no interest at all in all of these. Baba was perfectly neutral and submitted to the peculiar idiosyncrasies of his worshippers in order to avoid offending them. Left to himself, Baba would have no mark on his forehead. Baba did not at all believe that there is a separate Shiva and a separate Vishnu as gods. To him there was only one God, and that might be called Shiva or Vishnu, as well as Rama or Datta, or Allah or Hari, with equal justification, for as a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, as the saying goes. God is only one and not many. To him, God was to be pleased by the right loving approach from the heart, while the external marks and observances or names might be verified and be either indifferent or worthless. Another captious objection raised by a Hindu at Madras was that Sai Baba had no right to allow the performance of his worship by Hindus or for that matter by anybody. This objection was raised also by a European missionary at Rahata, to whom the worship of Baba was a mortal sin. As he said, this worship shows that he puts himself on a level with God. So said the missionary. The missionary's objection was stated with reference to another Baba, but the objection applies equally to Sai Baba or anybody else who is being worshipped. For the orthodox objection is also the same, that Sai Baba, being a man, ought not to be worshipped, and allowing himself to be worshipped shows that he is unfit to be respected even. It would take a very long time to convince each of these captious objectors and show how Baba's worship was first objected to by himself and finally acquiesced in by him in the interest of the vast masses and of the nation and of the humanity, and that his worship is the Guru worship ordained by the Sastras. In spite of all our arguments, such captious critics would still continue unconvinced, because their heart is not convinced. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still, as the saying goes. Therefore, wise Sai Bhaktas do not wish to waste their time in trying to convince such hopeless opponents. But here we may point out that the answer to such captious criticisms, Sai Baba's agreeing to his worship, as has already been stated, was not because he wanted plantains or coconuts, edibles and such, and all the rest. It was justifiable even according to Hindu scriptures, and was productive of various benefits, both to individual and nation, as well as international. It has the remarkable support of every sacred book of authority amongst Hindus, whether Shaivite or Vaishnavite. The Acharya or Guru is in every Hindu community to be worshipped with the same reverence as God, such as stated in the Upanishads. It is only in that case the fullest benefit of divine influence can reach the bhakta through that Guru. A powerful and pure vairagya, or dispassion, like Sai Baba, gains nothing by anything done at the worship. Baba could command all wealth and conveniences by his wonderful powers, but he did not care for any of these. It is not for these petty things that gurus like Sai Baba agree to be worshipped. They agree to be worshipped to carry out the divine plan that the vast masses of pious people should approach God through a God-man and derive therefrom all the benefits which they wish to attain, both temporal and spiritual alike. Such answers do not easily convince our orthodox friends. They continue to contend that the existing gods and institutions provide sufficient scope for one's religious inclinations, and that the addition of an extra god called Sai Baba is unnecessary and wrong. In the first place, it must be remembered that Sai Baba is not an additional god. If you have reverence for him and treat him as God, he is God, and there is only one God. If, however, anyone is accustomed to think always in terms of polytheism and wants additional gods, one after another, he is at liberty to manufacture out of Sai Baba an additional god if that suits his particular need. But really, each person that is worshipped is not an additional god. The objection that there are 33 crores of gods and that there is no need to add one more to that very large number fails, because the number of persons worshipped according to the Upanishads and the Sastras is not 33 crores, but more. Every acharya or sage is a deva, just like every husband, parent, to the person concerned, and so if we count the number of acharyas, fathers, mothers, and husbands who are worshipped or who can be worshipped, it will run into many hundreds of crores. This is patently frivolous objection, because we are not concerned with the number of gods. No earnest man is bothered when he is going on with his puja or worship of his own gods in his home or temple, about the existence of other gods in whom others are worshipping elsewhere. Why should not others go on worshipping their own forms of God? What harm does that do to anyone? The objections are so patently frivolous to one who has real bhakta in Sai that we need not dilate on the subject. We may stop with this, that there is no end to frivolous objections that can be raised. There is a saying in one of the southern languages that if you do not like a person, such as a wife, any touch of that person's hand or leg or anything else is an offense. So we may dismiss this objection to Sai Baba worship on the ground of adding to the number of gods worshipped in the country as due to prejudice and not worthy of further attention. Another obstacle that arose to Sai worship was from the conservative set, who consider it wrong for Sai Baba's devotees to ignore what they insist on as the essentials of religion. For instance, the putting on of marks, the observance of ceremonies. It is not true to say that Baba never discountenanced the orthodox people following the use of these marks or the performance of ceremonies where these are still lingering. Baba distinctly encouraged the performance of the post-mortem ceremonies in the case of several of his bhaktas. In fact, when people were beginning to doubt whether there was any use in performing post-funeral ceremonies for fear that they might never reach the departed or prove of any use, the fact that Baba rendered help in the above cases and assured all of post-mortem life has made some of the loving bhaktas follow the usual post-mortem ceremonies with greater faith. Baba knew that the subtle body, or the sukshma surya, survives the gross body and manifestation, and that the certain benefits could be derived and would be derived by the observance of these ceremonies. Therefore, Baba never objected to these ceremonies. He, however, had the remarkable power of guiding and directing the departed souls at the moment of death and thereafter, and his advice and action in the matter are of special importance to Sai Bhaktas. Baba told S.B. Dumal to perform the Masik Shraddha ceremony for his wife at Shirdi, and added that he would see that her soul was benefited. It is clear that Baba attached some meaning and value to these ceremonies. But the main interest in the case of departed people is not merely the feeding of the hungry linga or astral body. The main interest is the help one can give to reach God, which is the goal of the above-mentioned states or our present life. On this matter, Baba said, "If a devotee should die even 1,000 miles away, I draw the spirit to myself and see that it is helped." About Upasani's third wife, he said to the very greatly agitated Upasani Maharaj that her soul had come to him. As Baba is identified with God, that statement can only mean that the departed soul had reached God. Such a solace is a very valuable solace, and Baba gave it to several people, not only to Sri Upasani Maharaj, later one known as Upasani Baba, but also to others who had lost children. This matter is dealt with later in another chapter. At present, we shall only say that the objection that Baba interfered with the customary and orthodox ceremonies for the living or the dead is not true and sound. Baba allowed everyone to carry on whatever he considered proper, unless there was any direct harm in allowing it. However, objections are not always well thought out and based on reason, It is the conservative feeling that all is well with the objectors, that they are safe with God and with men that is at the root of the objections. If someone starts something outside the accustomed circle and groove of ideas, several at once condemn it as being totally wrong, for to them only their ideas and their practice are right. When we realize that such is the nature of orthodox and other objections, we can see how orthodoxy and similar criticism fail to stem the torrent of the Sai movement. That movement is based upon very sound principles of religion and spirituality, morality and philosophy, and upon the fact that Sai Baba is a God realizer of the highest level, working to benefit humanity itself, that he was a Parama Bhagavata, a Parama Yani, and a perfect master of all yoga, whether understood from the Sufi or Hindu or Muslim standpoint. He was carrying on through his life a very noble mission and acted, though unperceived mostly, as the guru and protector of many souls, though expressly and avowedly acting as guru to some. The basis of Baba's dealing as guru with such disciples has to be explained and understood, and that is why a number of chapters in this book have been devoted to the headings of guru worship and qualifications of gurus and disciples and their relations, before a detailed account of the disciples is given. For Baba has acted for many decades as the guru and had plenty of instances which are covered by what has been said in these chapters. A small percentage of his earlier disciples were orthodox to some extent. The extreme opposition by the orthodox to such Sai worship would naturally fall blunted and ineffective where the worship of and adherence to Baba was by such learned and eminent persons like Narayan Govinda Chandokar and so many others, all at the head of orthodox circles. As time went on, the number of orthodox men in eminent positions joining the Sai movement and treating him as their great divine guru increased. And that is what is going on even now in the 20th and 21st century. It is clear that it was Baba's intention to overcome orthodox objections by mere lapse of time, allowing the Sai worship by its intrinsic merit to extend and overflow all parts of India and thus make the orthodox realize that the great oceanic movement has vast force, divine force behind it. Even one of very dull imagination would be forced to see that the movement, which has covered the whole country, and in so short a time, within the last 20 years, must be divine, as explained by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, when he says, "Whatever has abundance of splendor, or has all prosperity or strength, know that that is a manifestation of a small fraction of myself." So says Lord Krishna. The essence of the 10th chapter of the Gita is to point out that whatever is powerful and splendid in every class or genus in existence is a manifestation of God, like the lion amongst the animals and the ocean amongst the waters. Thus, the slowly thinking and slowly working mind of even the torpid ultra-Orthodox objectors at last comes to realize that this movement is of God and cannot be resisted, and that the best thing one can do is to make the best of it. For Sai Bhakti offers excellent chance of individual benefits to all and sundry, provided they summon up some faith and act upon that faith. Truth is one and falsehoods are many. The sorts of objections that are raised from time to Sai worship, or that have been or can be raised, are so varied that it is not possible to give an exhaustive list of them, nor is it worthwhile. All these have been washed away by the tide of the Sai movement, and more of them are now being washed away. When the flimsiness of these objections is realized, the fact that the objections are so flimsy adds to the strength of the Sai movement. Objections to the Sai movement have been raised in some quarters with reference to Sastric texts, such as that Brahmins are the highest class and others are lower, and that Brahmins should not worship persons of the lower class or adopt a guru from the lower class. This raises again the old vexed question about caste and class, which luckily in the present state of independent India is dying out. There is increasing recognition even from political or social standpoints that class and caste fetters are out of date, that the formally accepted standpoint of class and caste are not being kept up by everyone coming under the group name, and that there is no justification for the limitations and disqualifications imposed on members of the several classes. Above all, this objection begs the question as to caste. As has been discussed amply elsewhere, if there is any caste still surviving, Baba's caste cannot be peremptorily fixed as being of this or that caste. Baba is to be treated as a Brahmin, according to the definition given of that word in various scriptures. For instance, it has been said that he who has got intense bhakti to God is a Brahmin. Baba was the embodiment of God devotion, God love, and was preeminently therefore a Brahmin. Again, only realizers of Brahman should be called Brahmins. Under this heading, also Baba is the person about whom we can feel confidence in asserting that he had realization, that he identified his soul with that of God or Brahman, and as a corollary therefrom was the antaryami of so many creatures. He was ever remembering God and was for many decades immersed in his concentration on God, and this could not have been produced perfect laya and perfect absorption in God. Therefore, being merged in God, Baba must be treated as Brahman, and much more. Therefore, as a Brahmin, if one wants that class name. We have elsewhere pointed out the absurdity of inquiring into the caste status of a Paramayani or a Parama Bhakta like Sai Baba, and quoted not mere scripture but also latter-day sayings of saints to the same effect. So the objection to Sai worship on the score of his caste position, raised still by some of the orthodox section, cannot be considered sound or worthy of further attention. The objection to Sai worship did not come always from orthodox sections. It came mostly from the inertia of human nature. People do not wish to move out of ruts or sloughs into which they have fallen. It is so unpleasant to be called upon to realize new situations. The old lines of demarcation have all been washed away, and new lines are forming. But still there are several Rip Van Winkle types who have not awakened themselves to the fact that the world has marched on since they last took note of it. Sai Bhakti is now a fact of very great religious importance to millions of souls in this country, and the Sai light is being carried across the waters to illuminate distant corners of the earth. There is no good in blinking the fact that Sai Bhakti is a live force, and a live force indeed. It is operating, molding the destinies of human beings here and elsewhere, and it will go on doing the same whether we care to face the fact or not. It is much wiser to take note of the facts as they are and to make the best use of the movement for individuals and society. Curious objections. Sometimes persons turn up and ask a propagandist of Sai, Do you ask us to give up our Rama worship and Shiva worship? And if we have those worships, why should we worship Sai? Why should you go on propagating Sai and not Shiva or Rama? In the first place, one has to give up all hope of satisfying such curious objectors, because the objection arises not from reasoning of an earnest sadhaka, anxious to advance his temporal and spiritual welfare by learning the truth, but from the underlying mentality or emotional factors. It is these factors that have to be treated and not a reasoning to be met in these cases. Anyhow, the question having been put, the listener would expect an answer, and let us give the answer. The first objection reminds us of the often quoted illustration of a leading question. Have you left off beating your mother? Answer, yes or no. There is a vicious assumption which is patent in the question about the mother. It ought to be equally patent in the above-mentioned objection. No respectable Sai Bhakta ever objected, and this author certainly does not object, nor did Sai ever object, to people worshipping Shiva or Rama. The truth is exactly the opposite. Sai Baba sent Abba Kulkarni to go and worship at a Shiva temple, before appearing to answer the charges framed against him by the deputy collector in a departmental inquiry. Similarly, he sent Shama to worship the goddess Vani on a hill, and Megha to worship Kandoba and all the other gods, and he blamed Nana Chandakar for avoiding darshan of Datta. Baba promoted faith in gods. Sai allowed all legitimate worship and his bhaktas to do the same. So the question, why do you object to Shiva or Rama worship, is just like the question about stopping the beating of the mother. As for the writer added to the question, namely, whether when Shiva and Rama are available for worship, they should be given up in favor of Sai worship, this again is a baseless assumption. Nobody asked, certainly Sai did not, to have people give up Shiva or Rama worship and take Sai as a substitute. The question may be, however, referring to the fact that several hereditary worshippers of Shiva or Rama or other gods have taken ardently to Sai worship, which at the final stage drowns all other worship in it. One ought to remember the famous saying, when one gets very fond of a particular form of worship, one is apt to ignore any other form of worship as a needless diversion of his thoughts and energies, which, however, involves no condemnation of the other forms. On the other hand, Sai becomes finally the one God, and so the same as the other forms of God, of Shiva and Rama. The Vedas thus praise God in one form only in each place. This is interpreted liberally, but is called worship of the form at one time and another form at another. Henotheism is called by Max Muller. To that extent, the above question may have a basis, and if explanation is wanted for that fact, the explanation is furnished by such worshippers. They find an enormous, unmistakable, and clear benefit accruing to them from the heartfelt Sai worship that they are going in for. And above all, they felt presence of Sai as an ever-present guardian with them, undertaking to safeguard and advance all their temporal and spiritual interests, and carrying out the undertaking by most miraculous or remarkable means unavailable to such worshippers and undreamt of by them till they came to Sai Baba. This ought to be a sufficient answer. Unfortunately, the combatant mood still persists, and such objectors ask, cannot the same benefit be derived by that worshipper by his proceeding with Rama or Shiva worship instead of Sai worship? This is a hypothetical question which we must decline to answer. The worshipper also would be entitled to decline to answer. In the first place, it is the feeling of the worshipper and this writer's feeling, and that of many bhaktas, that Sai is not different from God, that Shiva, Rama, and other Murthis are not different from God as truly proclaimed by Baba himself. Therefore, when a person goes on sincerely and earnestly worshipping Sai with all his heart and feeling that he is worshipping God, the absence of one name or another, Shiva or Rama, Allah or Hari, in the particular process of worship, is no objection to his persistence in his formula. Feeling alone counts. Vishnu Sahasramana gives 1,000 names, and nobody should insist on every worshipper mentioning all these 1,000 names. Some are satisfied with Rama alone and say, I repeat, Sri Rama Rama Rama, O dear one. I delight in that name Rama. That name Rama is equal to 1,000 names. That is the unique power, charm, and value of Ramanama to a Rama worshipper. It might, with perfect truth and sincerity, be uttered about Sai also, in which case it would run thus, which means this quarrel over names is very difficult to escape, as there is the law of association of ideas and feelings working in the region of language. Mahatma Gandhi, in trying to effect a rapprochement between Hindu and Muslims, started the formula and noted above in which Rahim and Ram are put together, and made his Hindu and Muslim followers repeat the formula or mantra. But some fastidious and overzealous adherents of each group, unable to overcome the effects of the above law, started up with an objection. One set said, why not omit all reference to Allah and Rahim and content ourselves with our usual Hindu name? While the other set, equally tenacious upholders of Muslim or Arabic names, said, why not omit all reference to Hindu names and retain only their Arabic or Urdu names? To both, Mahatma Gandhi had to point out that this object of the compounded formula was to familiarize the ear of impartial and cooperatively minded Hindus and Muslims with the admixture of both, so that both may get into the calm use and the inclination to hear both Muslim and Hindu names without loss of equanimity. This would become easier and inspiring by habit for future generations. That was the great object of Mahatma Gandhi's formula. Our objectors belong to the separatist fold and object to anything that seems new. Baba's standpoint on this matter was similar to Mahatma's and was live and let live, to unite persons in using common joint formulas as far as possible. Baba added to Gandhiji's plan of work. He secretly worked on the hearts of all. But if each wants to get on in his own way, the way that suits him best, by all means let him do so. He should not be hindered. This is the only way in which all sincere worshippers can be drawn together, and worship of Sai by sincere bhaktas is in no way different from worship of God. That is their feeling, and according to correct metaphysics and philosophy, there is no difference between the worship of Sai treated as God and the worship of God under any other name or any other form. Both achieve the same ends. As the Bhagavad Gita states, in whatever form you surrender to me, in that form I respond. Coming to the objection to any propaganda being done for Sai, the short answer is this. The honey and the flavor in the flower do propaganda for the flower to attract bees and carry on the work of reproduction of the plant, so that the earth may be replenished and more fruits may be had. This is nature. In a similar way, many a propagandist who is perfectly sincere is unconsciously a propagandist. He is devout bhakti achieving various rewards and the supreme reward of getting Baba for one's powerful guardian, the all-round guardian, to look after every interest is so grand, alluring, and contagious. The bhakta, after achieving so much of welfare, desires in his heart of hearts to share it with others, and therefore communicates his experience to others so that others may also have the same benefit, following well-known principle or aphorism, which means, when you get nice things to eat, do not monopolize it, but share it with others. In the case of the author of this book, that rule has been his life principle for numerous decades. Having discovered the great benefit of approaching Sai, he cannot resist the desire to communicate it to others so that all in the world may have the same benefit. Perhaps our readers have been told of Sri Ramanuja's conduct. His guru gave him a sacred mantra for moksha, consisting in the utterance of the holy name of God, and added the advice to him that he should not reveal it to others, but keep it a profound secret, in accordance with the stanza which says, "The wise men conceal these 9 things, including mantra." The wise conceal the mantra but proclaim the guru. What did Sri Ramanuja do? He got on the top of a tower and shouted the mantra, that is, the holy name of God, and said, "If I have committed a sin, let me go to hell. But if this mantra, being heard by others, will save them, that all these innumerable people who hear get saved thereby, I am willing to be damned to save all." That is exactly the feeling of this writer and of many other propagandists of Baba. The word propaganda has unfortunately gathered a bad odor in English. During the war, the term propaganda meant downright falsehood. But in our use of the word propaganda, it's downright truth, without the least tinge or taint of falsehood in it. Whereas warlike propaganda was selfish and false, the present Sai propaganda is unselfish and absolutely true.